We're going to begin our session with an opportunity to introduce you to one of our very important sponsors. And yesterday we had a chance to acknowledge everybody, all the sponsors who make this actual event possible. But we often like to highlight some of those folks who've been particularly important in developing our transfer agenda, thinking through what different aspects of transfer are important. And NACAC certainly plays that role in collaboration with NISTS. As a matter of fact, NACAC put their thoughts on paper and have made a commitment to transfer. Several years ago, there was a question about how can we be thinking about transfer in the admissions world, and they put together an ad hoc committee to really study what we could be doing and making sure that transfer was on the radar for many of our admission professionals, and unfortunately sometimes it's not. But what's really neat is that, as we talked about in yesterday's opening, a significant number of you in this room play a role in the admission function, whether it's your primary role or perhaps you're connected to the admission office, perhaps you're doing different things. So we know that transfer really bridges a lot of functional areas, but specifically that first gateway into the institution are admission offices, and to not understand transfer, to not have a really good concept of what that looks like, really does put the student at a disadvantage. So I'm really excited that we have a partnership with NACAC and that they feel like transfer is a fundamental piece of what they want to be promoting in the future. So at this point in time, I would like to invite my friend David Hawkins, and he's the Executive Director for Educational Content and Policy with the National Association for College Admission Counseling, to send some greetings to you. So David, please. Come on up.
Thank you, Janet. And I wanted to just be brief because I actually want to hear this panel and really don't want to hear myself talk for very long. NACAC, in case you don't know, is a nonprofit association of college admission officers, school counselors, and many, many others involved in the college transition process. So it's a little strange to be on the sponsor side of things, but we believe very strongly in what you all as individuals are doing and in what NISTS is doing. I do want to take a moment to recognize a couple of dignitaries here in the audience. First, Nancy Bean is our immediate past president from NACAC. She's from right here in Georgia, secondary school counselor. And Michelle Brown, are you here? If you raise your hand, there she is. Hey, Michelle, from Oakton Community College in Illinois. Recently served on our steering committee on admission practices. As well, Heather Durasco. Heather, are you in here? Are you out at the table? She might be out at the table still. So Heather is a really key part of our transfer initiatives at NACAC. She's a terrific intellect to work with, and she is a very passionate advocate for transfer within the NACAC staff even. So if you get a chance to say hi to her at our table out there, please do. Just the one thing I wanted to mention was that when I came to this conference 5 years ago, I'm back again now, the idea that every little conversation can contain something that we can all take and use back at wherever we come from is one of the things I find so important about conferences, about in-person events like this. And the way I found out about this conference is that a postcard came to NACAC, one little postcard. And that little postcard got put in my mailbox by the mail team. So I took a look at it, and I said, I should go there. And I did. And what came after that was that we decided to sponsor this program because we believe so strongly in what you're doing, which led to the advisory committee that Janet mentioned, which then led to what I call the transferization of NACAC, which sounds really dorky, but that's the way we say it. And what that means is that we now have elements of transfer in all of our programming. National college fairs, we have transfer programming there. We integrated transfer into our annual research surveys of counselors at the high school level and college admission offices. We have professional development. We have a regular column for transfer in our Journal of College Admission. And Janet graciously agreed to serve on our board as an appointed member. So we have transfer pretty well injected into the bloodstream of NACAC. So I'll just close by saying we're really, really happy to be able to support you all and this conference, and just want to leave you with the impression that NACAC supports wholeheartedly the work that you do. So thank you very much. As
conference organizers, we spend a tremendous amount of time thinking through the content of what we want to present to you. And we really think about it from a curriculum perspective. Sometimes people think of conferences or conference planning from a logistical standpoint, and absolutely that is a critical piece of making sure that you all are comfortable and get the things that you need. But more importantly, it's about the learning, it's about the study, and it's about ensuring that we're providing you with a wide variety of things for you to again, learn, absorb, discuss, and take back to your institutions and organizations. And so as we were thinking through that curriculum for this particular conference, we knew we had this amazing anchor of a presentation that we put together for you for this morning. That journal, the special issue, Transfer Matters, was really important to us. And in looking at, we wanted to really balance that with something from the practitioner perspective. In my welcome letter to all of you, I talked also about sustainability. We're at a point in our transfer evolution where we know a lot of the things that we should be doing, but we're not particularly clear on how to do those things. And as an office and as a staff, we've been grappling with that quite a bit. How do we share the hows with you? How do we share with those things that actually have worked, and more importantly, those things that have not worked that maybe you want to stay away from, or things to think about in that process? So we wanted to bring to you some seasoned professionals who have gone through that process of thinking about transfer holistically and from a partnership perspective. And it was really important that we brought to you folks who have been at this for a while, because you know what? They've experienced the highs, they've experienced the lows, they've experienced the successes that come with long-term sustainability of transfer initiatives. And so I couldn't be more thrilled to just be giving you that perspective to again balance some of the different offerings throughout this conference. So at this time, I'm going to invite our board colleague and my friend Betsy Griffin to come forward and introduce the panel.
Thank you, Janet. I'm really thrilled to have these two women with us to share their experiences. We have with us Catherine Buyarski, and she is at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, that are known as IUPUI. And Catherine is the Associate Dean for Student Affairs of University College. She's also the Executive Director of Student Success Initiatives for the Division of Undergraduate Education. So she has big roles. Our other presenter is Dr. Jennifer Sumner. She is at the University of Central Florida, where she's the director of Online Connect Center and Strategic Initiatives. She is also the director of the Bachelor of Applied Sciences. So she too holds down many roles. Both of these leaders have been involved in institution-wide initiatives, both creating and sustaining programs for transfer student success. One of the things that I wanted to say, these are relatively large institutions. I know some of you may be sitting there going, but my college has 600 students, and what can I do that they're doing? But as we've talked about this presentation and shared our ideas, any institution can take advantage of the kinds of things that these two institutions and these two great transfer leaders are doing. So I'm going to just turn it over to my colleagues now.
Great. Thank you, Betsy, and we're very excited to be here to be able to share what we've done on our campuses in terms of really starting at the beginning of looking at the needs, what we did, how we approached it, the lessons for sustainability. How did we move from initiatives to making transfer part of the institution's culture and day-to-day operations, and then some lessons learned. So first we'll focus on the need. And I want to just start by saying that we often, because we're involved in transfer all the time, we know there's a need. We understand the urgency, but our colleagues across campus often don't. And so this is a really important step. It's the call to action that gets people behind you. So you have to spend some time really identifying the need, codifying the need, and communicating the need on your campus in order to kind of jumpstart those initiatives to go forward. So at IUPUI, we used exactly this slide. This was the slide that I went around campus with my colleague Gina Jabot, who was the co-leader of our transfer initiative, that we regularly identified these points and went on. So we talked about, first of all, that transfers are a very large part of our population, which I think on our campus was absolutely unknown. We are nationally recognized for our involvement in the first year experience. Everybody knows about freshmen. Everybody knows our retention rate. We had lots of data, but this was a hidden population. Someone yesterday, I think, on one of in the plenary talked about transfers being invisible. So they are 30% of our incoming class every year. That was shocking to many people. They thought we brought in just a small number. That our transfer students are really good students. Another myth we had on our campus was that they weren't good students. They were coming to us because they didn't do well someplace else, but they're good students. They contribute significantly to the diversity on our campus. The students who transfer in are far more diverse than the students who start with us. And that 43%, closing in on 50% of our graduates are transfer students. This is a huge population. And then we move to say, well, they're here. There are lots of them, and they are important, and you need to pay attention to them. They're not succeeding in the way we would expect them to. So over a quarter of our transfer students leave after the first year. We have a 25% attrition rate. That's the same attrition rate as our first-year students. And what I would say is we are horrified by that statistic for our freshmen. Why are we not equally horrified that our transfer students are having the same experience? This is the same notion that students who come here need to succeed, but we don't seem to be worried about it with transfer students. That half of our graduates our transfer students will graduate in 6 years, which is above our graduation rate for new students, but wouldn't you think that would be higher? And why are they taking 6 years when they're our students come in with usually between 30 to 40 credits? It shouldn't be taking them 6 years to graduate. There are some problems in the pipeline. And transfer students, we do an entering student survey. So, to both freshmen and transfers, all new students. So we also know they lead far more complicated lives than our traditional freshmen do, which can explain some of the reasons that we're having issues with success. Now, from this, I am publicly sharing our shame around transfer students here. That was, and I'm doing that here because we did it on our campus, because that was part of creating the urgency. You have to be able to say that need and say there is a problem, and be able to say that very loud and vocally and own it, or nobody's going to follow behind you.
So at the University of Central Florida, we had somewhat of a different problem, because transfers are very well known at our campus. We are the largest transfer institution in the nation, so transfers have been a big part of our conversation for a while now. We are also home to the very distinctive Direct Connect to UCF program, which is where a majority of our students transfer from. Listening to the different sessions, we have a very good partnership, in fact, a great partnership with 6 state colleges, and over 54% of our students that are transferring into the university are coming through that very distinctive pipeline. We've got strong articulation agreements. We've got resources that are on each one of those partner campuses helping those students to transfer. We have a great, robust conversation around pathways and how we can continue to build those pathways and strengthen those pathways for students. So we have a very strong propensity to help transfer students. Our issue lied in the fact that we were trying to do so much in terms of transfer students. We were trying to do so many different things around the transfer population, and we oftentimes didn't know who was doing what and how effective those particular programs were on our particular campus. As I mentioned, we have a very high transfer rate. 61% of the close to 18,000 students that transferred in 14-15 were transfer students. Like Kathy, our transfer population is a very diverse population. Over 48% are unrepresented populations, 39% low income, and 31% first gen. In the last 5 years, we've actually increased degree earners for Black populations by 19% and Hispanics by 35%. So we have a very strong approach to how we work with transfer students, particularly in underrepresented populations. And as I mentioned, we have a great conversation around it, but we still have areas of improvement, and this is where we wanted to focus. So we've had good success around transfer students, but one of the things that we were noticing is we do experience transfer shock, just like most of your institutions do. For 2014, 2015, students that were coming into the institution had an average GPA of just over 3.0. Then they had a slight dip in their first term to about 2.7. One of the interesting things for us, though, is that after that second term, their GPAs actually popped back up to about 3.1, 3.2. 81% of our transfer students retained the following fall. 63% were first-time degree, had a 4-year time to degree completion, and 70% had a 6-year time to degree completion. But where we're at right now is we want to continue to narrow that gap between our FTIC students and our transfer population. Our goal at the institution is a zero gap between how we're working with transfer students and how we're working with our FTIC students and the outcomes that we see from both of those. Transfer is such a big part of what we do at UCF that it's actually embedded into our strategic plan, which is termed collective impact. And all of our metrics in our 5-year strategic plan are geared towards transfer students in some form or fashion. So we're very cognizant about our transfer students and continuing to move the ball in terms of success for those transfer students. Group discussion. Oh, that's me, sorry. So what we want to do right now is, so we've laid out a couple of different needs for you in terms of our particular institutions. One being that for Kathy's institution, transfers were not as a big a population in terms of the conversation around transfer students. For us, it was a little bit different in that we knew that we have a lot of transfer students, but how do we continue to bring those conversations to a fold or get some synergy around this conversation? So one of the things that we want to ask you is to talk to your partners beside you and ask what transfer challenges are you facing on your particular campuses. So we're going to take about 4 minutes or so and just talk around this particular question because we want to help that guide our conversation moving forward.
Okay, so let's come back together again. Oh, I know, it's so hard to stop the good conversation. All right, so hopefully what you got out of that very short time, and you'll have the rest of the conference to keep talking and thinking about these things with your colleagues, but we wanted to give you just a few minutes to think about what the need or the urgency, what can you hang your hat on? What's the rallying cry for your institution to start to build the urgency and the need for moving forward collectively as an institution toward making transfers a really important piece of who you are. So carry those ideas with you. We're going to have another point where you'll be able to talk again. We're kind of building a process here as we go. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the approach. Now, both of our institutions chose to approach this through the Gardner Institute's Foundation of Excellence on Transfer Students. It's a formal process that they help lead you through and provide support. But we want to let you know that is not necessary. You can do this in any number of ways as long as you follow a couple principles that really undergird the Gardner Institute's process for the way they do this. The first one is making sure that you do a self-study. that's based in data, that you really understand where your institution is with transfer students. And I don't think this is unique to transfer students. I think, for example, on my campus, we have lots to talk about. Well, I talked with a student and I talked with a student, the anecdotal stuff, which is absolutely critical and important. We need to understand the lived experiences of our students. But that kind of approach is only going to get an institution so far. Doing this very robust, data-driven self-study really confirms what you identify as the need, what you put out there, and continues then, it does two things. It grounds that need, and it gives you the information you need to start to move forward in terms of actions. And really this is about, Betsy said it really well yesterday, that the approach of Foundations of Excellence really is action research, that you're doing your data gathering, you're analyzing it, and then you are moving to action. And so developing an action plan, and we'll both talk about the way we did and enacted that very concrete action plan. And then the last one is that you have lots and lots and lots of stakeholders involved. On our campus, it was about 150 people were involved in this, in different subcommittees and different parts of the project. We were very intentional about who we invited to be committee chairs. We tried in almost all cases to have a staff member matched with a faculty member. We had upper administration involved. We had our partners from the community college involved. But with the idea then that you are seeding transfer initiatives throughout the entire campus. It's not, I've been on campuses where they're in my own, for other things, where there's kind of a blue ribbon task force named, and it's, 10 to 20 people, and they make these recommendations and then feed them out to the campus. This process is very different. And the one we would recommend for moving forward with transfers is really very collaborative, really involves everybody in developing that foundation, because I think that has a lot more, you get a lot more traction for sustainability and what happens. I'll give just kind of a quick little example of this. So my colleague, I think he's in the back of the room, Matt Wade, who is the director of our transfer center, is also an adjunct faculty member in the School of Business. And so the year after we did our self-study, he went to the orientation for adjunct transfer faculty. The director of undergraduate programs in our School of Business was a chair for one of our Foundations of Excellence, and he popped in my office after he went and he said, "Kathy, it was amazing. Peggy Daniels-Lees, she talked about we have lots of transfer students in our classes, and as faculty member, we need to be really, really aware of it." And he said, never before has she said that. Really small example, but by including her in that process, well, it wasn't a formal action step that she say, do this as part of orientation. You can't help but start to move and see that culture forward.
And if I may also add to that, what Kathy is saying in terms of the Foundations of Excellence, this was an initiative that we undertook as a catalyst to start the conversation around our institution. As I mentioned, we have such a large institution. We have so many faculty, staff, professionals, students, obviously, that are engaged or somehow interacting with transfer students. So this was a great method for us to build a cohesive conversation around at our very large institution. And to Kathy's point, the way that we invited folks to participate in this particular conversation is our provost. We initiated his help, and we had a campus-wide, a university-wide all-call. It was like a gala type of an event. We had sign-up tables in the back. Often, I'm sure that you know, and maybe we here are the ones that do this, but we will be the volunteers, or we will be the chosen ones that will interact in every conversation, in every committee, and so you have those go-to people. We wanted to expand the conversation beyond those go-to people because we understood that every single person at our campus is somehow affected by this transfer initiative. So we invited everybody at the institution to participate, and we had sign-up sheets for these committees. So just a point to reference that bring in other folks that aren't often involved in the conversation. So if you know that they're out there, your faculty, up-and-coming professional staff that often don't have the opportunity, elicit their help. And always elicit the help of students. Get them involved in the conversation as well. That's a critical part in what we did.
Mm-hmm. So you identify the need, and then our second kind of step in sustainability is thinking about your approach and what's going to work best on your campus. How can you get the most people involved through that? So let's move to sustaining a campus initiative. So in this section, I'm going to talk a little bit more from the 30,000-foot institutional level, and then Jenny's going to offer kind of the programmatic sustainability kind of pieces, so you have a perspective on both. So one of the things that kind of the big recommendations that I think that we came out with, again, was that the process was purposefully inclusive and very widespread. And, you know, we've said it about, 100 times in the last 3 minutes. This is really important if you are looking towards sustaining change and changing the culture of your institution. You have to have widespread buy-in at all levels, including the top. We were very aware that while the work really needed to be done and we were going to sustain change through the on-the-ground faculty, staff, people who are working every day, this was not going to remain an institutional priority without top administrative support. In fact, the woman who is now our provost came with us to the initial starts of the Foundation of Excellence project because she was so invested in making sure this was an institutional priority. So you have to kind of have both. You have to have widespread involvement and support from the top. One of the other things we did, and I'll ask you, what's your Foundation's Excellent project? So on our campus, we try really hard not to publish anything in paper anymore. Everything goes on the web, except for things like our annual report, our diversity report, really key initiatives. So we made the choice to publish, I don't have a copy of ours, but this is, Central Florida did the same thing. We published a very slick, glossy kind of summary of what we found and our recommendations. And this was intentionally done because, again, on our campus, key initiatives get one of these. And I have to be honest, I didn't ask for permission. I just said, if this is what all like the big stuff gets, we're doing the same thing. We're going to publish a fancy report. And subtly that communicates this is very important to the campus. We developed a very specific, concrete 3-year action plan. So we had all of these task groups. I think we had 10 of them. They came back with 128 recommendations. And I have to tell you, when they first came in, I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I mean, this is really good, but wow, how are we going to even move forward with 128 recommendations? We kind of summarized them, we put together, and we developed. We looked at what needs to come before B, and we developed a very concrete action plan with goals. We attached them to years, and we attached them to, whenever we could, establish campus committees. So, for example, at the time, we don't have the group anymore, but at the time we had a very strong council on retention and graduation. There were some tasks we assigned to the Council on Retention and Graduation. There are some tasks we assigned to our Campus Advising Council. There were some tasks we assigned to the Office of Admissions. So we assigned them out, again with an eye toward making sure that people around the whole campus were responsible for making this happen. This was not going to be Matt and I and Rachel, our 2 transfer staff members, making this happen. This was going to be the whole campus. We also then used the same strategy for those action teams where we needed to appoint new action teams. We used the same approach that we did when we appointed the study groups. We identified key leaders and ideally usually both a faculty and a staff member. And then after we each year what we've done is we've gotten ourselves on the agenda of key campus groups. So we go to Faculty Council annually and we report. We go to the Council on Retention and Graduation and we report. We go to Dean's Council and we report on the actions we've taken, so that we're recognizing that we're moving forward and people know about it. It's not just the people who are involved with transfer where we're sitting in a little group saying, yay, we've done a lot, which is wonderful, we do that, but everyone else needs to know that as well. On our campus, data speaks. We are a phenomenally data-driven institution. And so this was one of the things we intentionally did for sustainability. We knew from our experience with the freshman year that data was what made the difference. And you can walk up to almost anyone on our campus and ask what the freshman retention rate is, and they know. It's not a secret, the data's out there. We said we have to build the same infrastructure on our campus. And so this is a snapshot of an evolving website, and part of our institutional research office has developed a really fabulous portal to go get all kinds of data on all kinds of students. But I have to tell you, most of the time it was really geared toward first-time, full-time freshmen. And so we have worked very hard to develop this suite of tools where anyone can go in at any point in time. If I am an academic advisor in the School of Education, I can go in, I can see how many transfer students have come in, I can see their success rates, I can see what courses they're bringing in with them, I can see what courses they're enrolling in. Our School of Liberal Arts, which offers the vast majority of general education courses, of course is very interested in what courses our transfer students are completing at the community college, because that's a lack of revenue for them. They're not going to take those classes on our campus. But they also, then what they want to do then is look toward what they are taking on our campus and where there are opportunities for growth and enrollment and knowledge. They can do that on this site. And so, again, it's looking toward what's important on your campus, what speaks, and investing a lot in it. So we said data speaks on our campus. We want data in everybody's hands. So we built this site and included and expanded what we had done with freshmen to include transfers as a main effort towards sustainability on our campus.
And I'm going to build off of that as well in terms of the data exchange. We have a very robust data exchange between especially the 6 state partners that we have in the Direct Connect pipeline. We have data going back and forth between all institutions so that, as we heard this morning, we can actually track the students that are coming in as transfers from those institutions and then give that information back to the institution to tell them how their cohorts of students have done as they've come through the pipeline and as they've started to graduate from the university. So it gives a nice snapshot of the entire student journey. So data, to Kathy's point, is very important in anything that we're doing as we're building transfer initiatives. So as Kathy mentioned, I want to take first from just a brief snapshot from the 30,000-foot view as well, but then narrow it down to some initiatives and how we've been able to sustain those at the institution. So when we did our self-study, and as Kathy mentioned, it's very important to get a snapshot of what your institution is doing. One of the first things that we noticed right off the bat is that we did not have a philosophy for how and why we work with transfer students. We've been in the transfer game for a while. Everybody knew that we were a large institution, that we had a large number of transfer students, but we didn't have one cohesive statement or message that we can hang on the wall right there with our university mission and creed as to why and how we're working with transfer students. So through this process, that was identified as a weakness in what we were doing. So we knew that everybody had this goal in mind to push forward the success of transfer students, but how and why are we doing that as an institution? So this became an important endeavor for us to make a transfer philosophy statement that was as important as our entire university mission statement and our vision statement that we have as an institution. The other thing that we recognized early on is that, as I mentioned, we have a lot of people doing a lot of different things. Through this particular self-study, we found over 500 different programs and initiatives at our institution that indirectly or directly touch transfer students. So how are we going to get our hands wrapped around all of these different initiatives That was the second big point that we discovered. The other thing that we discovered is we're doing a great job in terms of the pipeline of students and the pathway, but where we were falling short is linking in that conversation with the students their careers and their ultimate outcomes. We were trying to get them to step A to step B, which is great, but we wanted to then link that conversation to the ultimate result. Why is it important to get this degree from the institution? Because it's going to link ultimately to the career that you want and to the goals that you want as a professional. So drawing that linkage for the student throughout their entire journey was an important piece for us to focus again on those career and life goals. The other thing that we realized is, again, faculty, they're engaged in the conversation, but they often aren't engaged at the level that we are. They don't appreciate or even understand the nuances of what a transfer student goes through in terms of the challenges and barriers that they often face. I'm sure you've heard the anecdotal stories from faculty. Well, transfer students aren't as prepared, or transfer students are doing this or that in my class. Where is the evidence and the data to back that up? Those anecdotes are nice, but where's the hard data that's going to back up those stories that you're telling us about transfer students? So because of that, we wanted to get the faculty involved in this conversation, get them involved early, and keep them involved in that conversation all the way throughout so that they know how transfer students are coming into the university and what barriers and challenges that they face. So from that, Kathy's institution had 128 recommendations from their self-study. We had 118 recommendations from our self-study. So how are we going to bring those down and compartmentalize those into actionable items, into things that we can actually get our hands wrapped around and move forward? Well, there's a couple of things that we wanted to hit off right out of the bat. Right out of the box, excuse me. We wanted to have a transfer philosophy in terms of how we work with our students. So that transfer philosophy statement was very important to us. So we moved as a institution. This was vetted by the provost. We put forward our recommendations of this. We engaged marketing in the conversation. We engaged, obviously, students in the conversation, faculty, staff. We had a committee developed and designed to help us figure out what this transfer philosophy statement could look like. That has been vetted, and we're moving it forward as a key piece in the university and in our conversation about transfer students. The other thing that we looked at is how do we continue to build a new process for transfer orientation, especially incorporating those conversations around life and career. Right, meeting those goals for the students, how do we incorporate that into our orientation conversation? Typically, orientations will involve application, admission, enrollment processes, but we wanted to flip that orientation conversation just a little bit and bring in those career goals, those life goals, and those success goals as they're going through the institution. So we looked at our orientation and we changed the look and feel of that orientation. The other thing that we did is we developed some new methodologies around curriculum alignment. Through our efforts, we have a very robust curriculum alignment initiative at the university with all of our 6 state partners. We hold meetings every term with every single major that we are looking to align our courses with. We started in 2006 with the STEM majors, and we have had successful results out of that initiative. So we, again, have faculty that are meeting every term around each one of these majors. Through this self-study, we said, you know, we're doing great in this area. Let's actually expand it. Let's go beyond the STEM. So now we've actually expanded our curriculum alignment initiative to include writing and rhetoric and communication as well. So this is an area that highlighted in our self-study things that we're doing very well and how we can even take those to the next level, which was important for us. And then new opportunity, the next one is in terms of transfer credit evaluations. As we heard earlier through earlier session, transfer credit evaluation is a huge part of the transfer student success, making sure that they know what credits are coming in, how they're coming in, when they will come in, and hopefully having that conversation with them before they even apply to the university so that they can make an intelligent and informed decision. This is the one big piece where we're putting a lot of resources into getting a new system that's going to transform the landscape in terms of how we work with credit evaluations. And I do want to pause here and say, in terms of initiatives like this, we're not putting many resources into this, all right? Human capital, obviously, but there's not a lot of resources that have to go into this. This is just a reshaping and a reframing on how we're moving through some of these initiatives, especially keeping them very collaborative in nature. When we talked about this and we were looking at this presentation, we wanted to make sure that we're giving points that are not high in capital and that you don't have to go out and spend millions of dollars and put a lot of resources towards. These are things that you can actually start to implement on your own campuses. The other one that we found that we're moving towards in terms of transfer student success is their engagement. At the university our size, we've got a lot of resources that are in a lot of desperate areas, so we're moving now to bring them into one spot called the Transfer Hub, that the student can go right to that location. It's an online location, and get access to all of the resources as a transfer student that they're going to need to be successful, versus having to go down all of these rabbit holes to find what it is that they're looking for. So those were key things for us. And then in terms of sustainability, as I mentioned before, it really is pulling for us a border around everything that we're doing. So after we had a successful run with the Foundations of Excellence initiative and the support from the folks at the Gardner Institute, we actually reframed this conversation to what we're now terming Transfer Alliance. Transfer Alliance is now the initiative on campus that pulls in all of these different conversations so that we have a one-stop shop for everything that's going on in terms of transfer. Our priority areas, there are 4 of them: communication, engagement, credit evaluations, and connections. It was very important for us to maintain the momentum on each one of those. We also have deployment strategies within each one of those 4 areas. So we've got teams that are continuing to keep the pulse on what is going on in these priority areas. And as I mentioned, we're contributing to our collective impact, which is our strategic plan at the university. So it's important to wrap all of this up in terms of the full institution and the full strategic plan with what you're doing, because if you really want to make an impact, it's got to be from the top, and it has to have that momentum behind it as well. The other thing that I want to mention in terms of Transfer Alliance and what we're doing to continue to sustain this is you all can do this, right, in terms of where you're at in your position. I am at the director level, so it was something that I was highly engaged in terms of my position, but I'm not a provost of an institution. I'm certainly not a president of an institution. So this conversation started at our level, right? It started at the director level, and it's been the sustaining and the momentum has happened with us that are doing the work. We obviously have the champions at the top who are helping to promote what it is that we're doing, but you all can engage in this at whatever level you're at your particular institution. So we just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that fact. All right, so we're going to move on to our next group discussion, taking all of this into account. What, if any, approach has your institution used to evaluate the delivery of the transfer experience? And does your institution have a comprehensive plan for transfers that is connected to your larger strategic plan? So we thought we'd give you a couple of minutes coming off your conversation of what challenges you faced, listening to some of the different things that we've done in terms of trying to sustain the momentum of transfer student success. But what are some things that you're doing at your institution to either evaluate the delivery of the experience for transfer students, and if and how that's been connected to your overall strategic plan?
So, one of the things that we, like in terms of big lessons learned, one of our big lessons learned was about being really, really visible. And one of the best recommendations we got was to involve our communications and marketing people heavily in this initiative. And I have to be honest, I would have never thought of that at all. They were people, like they were the people on my campus I went to when we needed a press release or whatever. But having them involved from the beginning allowed them to really look at everything we were doing and pick out big communication points. And our target audience was not external, which is whom they usually work with. It was internal. So they helped us do a really creative campaign around campus where we had pictures of faculty and staff with, in their own words, quotes of recommendations or tips on how to help serve transfer students in advising or in your classroom, wherever it may be. And they went out on Twitter, they went out on the institution's Facebook page, and they were on digital signage around the campus, which was a really great campaign to kind of keep the momentum going, keep people involved. And, you know, as much as we were really proud of that there are 150 people across campus involved in that, that is a very small portion of the thousands of faculty and staff we have on our campus. So we needed to think about how we were going to plant seeds in the minds of everybody else. We also, I shouldn't say we, our transfer staff, Matt and Rachel, who are here, you can talk with them, they're fabulous, made sure that when we had events for transfer students, they were really visible. They were in the campus center, not just because that's convenient for transfer students, because it made it really visible. One of the things they do is a t-shirt exchange, and I think that was an idea they got at this conference, where you turn in your t-shirt from your old institution, get an IUPUI t-shirt, and then Rachel made a fabulous kind of quilt background of all of these t-shirts, and that's their background whenever they're in, whenever there's an event, whenever there's something visible, and something they're doing on campus. Again, be visible. When we followed the lead of this organization and did transfer appreciation on our campus, not just little, but big buttons that people wore that said, you know, transfer students are fabulous, and you know, whatever they said. So make sure that going forward, once you have your action items, you're really thinking about how do I make this visible and apparent to what's going on campus. The second lesson learned was really about making sure people know the results that are happening. So for example, I sit on a lot of committees where we're talking about retention, graduation, all those kinds of things, and we talk about credit. And we had decreased the time, again, I'm sharing my shame. It took us 4 to 6 weeks to evaluate transfer credit at one point in time. That's down to 2 to 3 days now. That's a huge win. But I'd go to meetings and I'd hear people say, well, if we could only speed up the transfer credit process, it takes 4 weeks. And so I realized very quickly people didn't know the progress we had made. And so really being on it and being very intentional, while we had done a lot, I mean, we probably have a list of, 40 things we did. I have 4 here. We picked 4 messages, being very strategic. What could I and Matt and Rachel and anybody else who was involved say to say we've made progress? Transfer, we are really working on transfer. So we, again, transfer credit was the big thing I was hearing in my ear. We added 15,000 articulation rules in the first 6 months of this project. We overhauled our transfer orientation, including an online orientation component that I'll make an unsolicited plug for. We used Advantage Design Group. They were fabulous. They've really helped us do another component of orientation. And we've heard a lot about websites and information. We developed a whole new website that was there for transfer students. Overall, play to your campus's values. What's important to your campus? What speak to your campus? So for us, diversity, data, completion, access, relentlessly beat the drum. Don't stop talking about it. Even when for you, it's like what you do every single day. So it's not new and exciting, and sometimes you feel like the progress is small. Make sure you are always talking about transfers in any place that you can. There is a point where you're going to have some people, I'll be honest, we have some faculty on our campus who will always believe that the students who come from community colleges are not as well prepared as our beginners, which is the exact opposite of what our data shows. But, rather that we decided early on, rather than invest all of our time and energy and bring in the naysayers on, start with our supporters. Really work hard, gain momentum, talk about that momentum, and the skeptics will follow, will come in there. So that was a choice about where we spent our time and attention. And finally, make sure you're assessing everything you do so you can show that what you're doing works and that you are making progress. Your transfer students are, for us, we established benchmarks about credit completion, enrollment, credit completion, graduation. We have benchmarks for the number of undistributed credits that we bring in, the number of credits that are applied toward degrees. We establish those benchmarks, and then we publicize our movement toward those benchmarks.
So I'm going to echo what Kathy said. First of all, get folks involved at every single level, and oftentimes from those groups that you might not even consider. So early on, we looked at the landscape of what we're doing and how we want to be successful at doing this. So we went out and we talked to our marketing department, who oftentimes you don't think of to bring into these types of conversations. We went out and we talked to our faculty. We went out and talked to other units that are on campus that oftentimes we don't engage in these types of initiatives. And when you talk to them, they're thrilled. They want to be involved in this conversation. Thank you for including this. This is fantastic work that you're doing. How can we continue to be a good partner with you? Right now, every time I set up a meeting appointment, I think through, okay, who do I need to make sure I include in this particular meeting so that I have everybody that I can think of to be represented in this particular conversation. And that's become pervasive in the work that we're doing at the institution, especially around the conversation of transfer students. So think across the landscape of who often is not involved in this conversation and get them to be key champions for you as you continue your work with transfer students. Another point that Kathy made that I want to capitalize on as well is maybe it's just the nature of who we are and what we do, but sometimes we're a little too humble in our successes. So toot your own horn about what it is, the wins that you've made, the initiatives that you're engaging in, how you've affected transfer students. So don't be afraid to go out and promote all of those wins and all of those successes. Find leaders who take accountability for the effort, and that might be you. You might have to be the leader that's going to take responsibility and accountability for this effort. Oftentimes we have so many balls that we're juggling in the air that it's often easy to pass off one initiative or to let that particular ball drop because it's not as important. But anything that we do, especially at the university, that we want to sustain, we've got one leader that's going to keep beating the drum, that's going to keep bringing us back to focus on that particular initiative. So make sure that you've got that one leader that's going to be accountable for the success of each initiative that you drive forward. And as I mentioned, that could be you. So if you have an initiative, stand up, say, I want to run this, I want to be in charge of this, and I will take ownership and accountability for moving this particular initiative forward. Students love to talk. They will give us their feedback at every single turn. So everything that we do, we always make sure that we include students, whether through focus grouping, surveying. That's one of the things in terms of our self-study that we did. A unique aspect of trying to get students engaged and taking a survey about how we're working with transfer students is we did a campaign around fortune cookies. So we actually had fortune cookies that we made that had the little URL inside the cookie. So you got a cookie, you crack the cookie, here's the link to the survey, help us set your fortune, right? Help us set your future and give us feedback on what it is that you're doing. And because of those results, as Kathy mentioned as well, we continue to give those and share those results so that the students knew that they were making an impact as well. So make sure that you're including students. Another piece to that is we have a very large online contingent at the university, a very large online population of students. We make sure that they are included in the conversation as well. We have Skype capabilities, so if we're holding a meeting and we need student feedback, we make sure that online students are represented in that conversation as well. Oftentimes, they will give us unique challenges that we had not even thought of. So make sure that those meetings are accessible to students when you invite them. Keep everybody informed throughout the entire process. And the biggest for me is have fun. Have fun with this process. You know, in my syllabus for my classes, I tell my students, if I'm not having fun teaching this, I know you're not having fun learning this. So make sure that in all of these initiatives that you're enjoying the process. We're obviously all passionate about what we're doing or we wouldn't be here. Bring that passion and enthusiasm to these types of initiatives and it will continue to bring you success.
Okay, I want to sum up some of the key findings, just briefly, because we're pretty much out of time. Have a representative group of stakeholders. Maintain a representative group of stakeholders. You've heard Kathy and Jenny say that over and over. Use data, broadly share data. You just heard assess what you're doing and get that information back out frequently. Key. And cultivate and maintain the support of your top administrators. One of the things that we see in our work is a killer can be new administrators brought on to the institution who don't know what's going on and have a different agenda. So you have to be very intentional about keeping administrators engaged and bringing in the new ones. And connect to larger goals, and you heard about connecting to strategic plan, larger goals. So I want to thank our two presenters. I'm sure they'll answer questions that you might have later, but I know our time is